So it's been a while since I actually read this book, but I thought it would be, I think it's important for me to kind of lay my thoughts down on this person because I'm trying to read his books in semi-order and some kind of like semblance of an order, but I want to read most of his books. This is The Birth of Tragedy by Friedrich Nietzsche, and I did read this a couple of months ago before I left for I finished it in my first few days of being in Japan. But I started it a bit earlier than that, and The Birth of Tragedy, I guess for those who are unfamiliar with Friedrich Nietzsche's, let's say, his beginnings, I guess. Nietzsche was, I guess, if, maybe. No, I think I think anyone who clicks this video knows who Friedrich Nietzsche is, but some people may not know that he was actually a classic scholar. So he was actually a scholar of Greek literature before he became, perhaps before he became a philosopher. He was a classics teacher. He was a professor who taught about the Greek writings, especially early classical Greek writings, and ever since he was young, he was very moved by the Greeks. He loves the Greeks. Specifically, he loves the. Uh, it sucks now because it's been so long. I don't even remember their names. I really need to start reading them. Heraclitus, I think. He doesn't like Socrates very much, but he likes a lot of these earlier Greek writers and tragedians. I think he also likes Sophocles, but so this is idea. So the book is about Nietzsche's ideas on, again, it's called The Birth of Tragedy, and tragedy here has to do with, I guess, Greek tragedy. He wants to kind of, not really Greek tragedy, but he wants to kind of delineate maybe how some of these thoughts progressed, how the idea of tragedy kind of progressed, and how it changed over certain Greek thinkers and Greek writers, and how Sophocles, for example, how he or not well. Did I say Sophocles earlier? I made a mistake. He doesn't like Socrates, but so I kind of how Socrates kind of changed how one would perceive of the tragedy and how whatever. So the whole book, I mean, the whole book is mostly about, and what it kind of becomes more prominent in other people who may know about Nietzsche. It's about the differences between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, right? So he talks about these two concepts that he creates the terms for them, but they're based on Apollo the god and Dionysus he it's been a while, and it sucks because I'm trying to remember what they mean. I'm sure I know what they mean, but it's hard for me to really articulate. It's hard to kind of articulate off the bat, just off the top of my head. But I think it's something to do with perhaps the Dionysian has more to do with, say, metaphysical, the metaphysical, and the Apollonian has more to do with not the metaphysical. I may be making mistakes on how I understood this, but I mean, I guess it's also interesting to just see how I kind of remember this from several months ago, and whether or not I make mistakes in this is kind of, it's fine. But how I understood it was that the Dionysian has to do again with the metaphysical nature of things, and while he can be, you can kind of read The Birth of Tragedy as Nietzsche talking about how the Dionysian is more important, maybe, or is it better for some or whatever. But I think it's more about how it's about the balance between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, and how at some degree you want them to kind of interrelate with each other. Although it seems that Nietzsche, as a person on his own, finds more perhaps joy or maybe some more fulfillment or whatever that means with that of the Dionysian elements of things. So he would, for example, a lot of the book. What I love the most about the book, I guess I can just talk about that. What I love the most about the book is his utter love for music. He dedicates the book to Richard Wagner, and he has a lot of these very beautiful and lyrical descriptions of why he absolutely loves music, and how music kind of puts you into the state, and it kind of lets you experience these metaphysical things. It seems to me that he does a lot of or he associates music with the metaphysical a lot, and specifically the music of Wagner is something that he thinks is of just utter value in the world. That if there's anything we should just engage with the arts, with beauty, with the music, with the transcend. Well, I don't know if the transcendence is the right word, but just he really has this. At least in this book, it seems like he has this passion for, uh, like allowing oneself to enter states of, in which they experience and observe and just be a part of beauty and the beauty of things. And for him, a lot of the time, beauty is best manifested in the perhaps the ethereal nature of music, and specifically the music of Wagner. And I think the second half of the book goes more into detail with the specifics of the music. What's fascinating, he references some people I've read before, like Arthur Schopenhauer, who, maybe he doesn't really talk about too much in this book. I don't remember, honestly, because I feel like my understanding of Nietzsche is like, because I've been reading other things from Nietzsche. I'm not sure exactly which ones were from this book, or which ones I just remember off the top of my head, or which ones I heard from other people. But Schopenhauer was a big influence on Friedrich Nietzsche. He read him when he was much younger. Although at some point he decides to kind of rebel against the Schopenhauerian idea of or at least the pessimism of Schopenhauer becomes a contentious point for Nietzsche, because he wants to turn the pessimism into a form of optimism. But one of the things that connected him and the Schopenhauer was both of them had, again, that kind of, I'm not sure if it came from Schopenhauer or if they just happened to have the same ideas, but they both have this absolute love for music. And it's a kind of, it's almost divine to the extent that they describe it. It's almost like a divine thing music is for them. So in that sense, for me personally, that's how I first kind of, the first thing I've read from Nietzsche, from his own words, and I really thought it was kind of beautiful to read him write so, eloquently about how much he just loves music. I mean, I'm sure that's not really what the book is about. The book is not about how much he loves music. But I guess, that's what connected to me the most. And I guess that must, says more about me than it really does. But I found it very moving. And I did find the same kind of sentiments in Schopenhauer's writings quite moving as well, because of just how much value they put into the arts and beauty. And I think that is quite important. From what I understand, Nietzsche he's not a big fan of this book, I think, and he writes something which is actually prefaced in this Penguin Classics edition, that he kind of criticizes everything he wrote in the book, and he writes a separate kind of short piece on it, on how much on what the thing that he said he doesn't agree with anymore with what he said. And it's not like my favorite philosophical book I've read, because I do think it kind of, I lost interest in the second half, or like it became harder for me to go through the whole thing when he starts going into the specifics of Wagner. But I did find the sentiment of it quite moving, and it was a nice kind of entry point to the thoughts of Nietzsche, and just having a sense of what he found was important, I thought was just, nice to read about. And he writes very well. Like, he writes very well, I think. So yeah, that's what I thought. Friedrich Nietzsche, Birth of Tragedy. I hope I didn't mess up. I probably messed up all the descriptions of the book, but it's been a while, and it's hard to really retain knowledge when you kind of have so much information flowing through you. So, well, that's what I thought about it, and read it if you can. I really recommend it.